Welcome back. In the previous video, we've implemented the ability to play turn-in-place animations once we've rotated more than 90 degrees in the left or right directions. But now we need to be able to rotate the root bone back when we're playing those rotating animations, so we're actually turning. We're going to do this by using animation curves. Let's get started. In our underscore game character animations folder, find the idle turn 90 left trimmed and double click that animation. Now you'll notice here just under the notify section, there's a curve section and it's already got several curves. And these curves can be used in different ways. Now if you double click on this one called distance curve, you'll see that there are multiple points on the curve, and this vertical axis goes from -90 up to 0. Now we're going to use a curve just like this for our turn in place animation, except I'd like to show you how to create our own curve, because we may end up in the future getting turn in place animations that don't have curves already. So we need to make sure we know how to make our own. So we'll make our own distance curve. So here in the curves section, here's a drop down that says curves. Click on that, and here we have the option to add a curve. And at the very top, we see here create curve. Go ahead and click on that, and it's asking for a curve name. Now let's go ahead and just call this curve rotation. Now we have a curve called rotation. Double click on this, and now you'll see that we have a curve and there are no points in it. I'm going to go ahead and hit the pause button so that it's not playing our animation anymore. Now we can add points to this just like when we created a curve when we made a curve float asset. We can right click and select add key. Now we're going to add a couple more keys to this. So right click a couple more times and use add key so that we have 3 curve keys total. 1, 2, and 3. So now that we have 3 keys, we can give these keys values for the first and second components. Now we're going to make this curve look a lot like that first curve we took a look at, distance curve. This curve starts at -90 and smoothly goes up to 0, and it takes about 0.7 seconds to get there. So here in the curve editor, select our first point and give it a x-axis value of 0 and a y-axis value of -90. Let's click the second point and we'll put this about halfway through the animation, or about 0.35 seconds. And we'll give it a second value, the y-axis value of -45. That's about halfway up from -90 to 0. And finally, select the third one. We'll give this one a value of 0.7 seconds for the x-axis, and we'll give it 0 for the y-axis. So here's our curve. It looks like a straight line. Now click and drag to highlight all 3 of these, and up here where it says zoom to fit, we can click that. Now we have this zoomed to fit our 3 points. With all 3 of them selected, we can right click on any one of them and select auto, and this gives us a nice smooth curve. And of course we can click on any one of them and alter it so that it looks nice and smooth. This is the curve that we want, something nice and smooth going from -90 smoothly up to 0 at 0.7 seconds. Now our animation doesn't quite reach 0.7 seconds, so we can actually bring this back a little bit. It looks like our animation goes to maybe 0.65. We can give this an X value of 0.65 instead. And that's just about right there at the end. Close enough. So go ahead and click Save. And now we have an animation curve called rotation. Now we also want a curve that's going to be simply 1. And this is a curve that we can check to see if it has a value of 1, and if the animation is playing, we'll get that value of 1. If the animation is not playing, well, then we won't get that value of 1. So it's a good way to show us whether or not the animation is playing. For something like this, we add a curve, so click on the drop down for curves, but instead it's going to be called metadata. Click Add Metadata, and down at the bottom, click on Create New, and we'll simply call this one Turning. Now, this will simply have a value of 1 if we're playing this animation. Otherwise, if we're not playing this animation, we won't get any information if we try to get the curve value of the turning curve. That's what metadata is good for animations. So we have a distance curve and we have a turning metadata curve, which will be 1 if we're turning. Go ahead and save this and close out of this animation. We're going to do the same thing for idle turn 90 right trimmed. So open up that animation. For this animation, we're going to add another curve just like we did for the turn left animation. So we're going to click the drop down and click Add Curve. And you'll see down here we already have the rotation curve. Click on that, and now we have a curve called rotation. Double click it and we're ready to make our rotation curve. I'll hit pause and we'll go ahead and add 3 keys just like we did before. So right click, add key, right click, add key, and right click, add key. And that one looks like it went just past, and we're at 0.8 here. If we go back just on the left, we're at 0.7. So it looks like we want this to be at about 0.75. And while we're at it, this rightmost key can go up to 0. Now the first key is going to be at 0 and its y-axis value will be -90. And then of course our middle key here will be halfway or roughly there. We'll make it 0.35 seconds and -45. Now we can scroll all the way out and you'll see that we have to zoom quite far out to see all 3 points. We can go ahead and select all of them by clicking and dragging, and then up here we'll choose Zoom to Fit, and now we can see them nicely. With all 3 selected, right click and choose Auto to get a smooth curve. Click off to deselect, and then click the middle one so that we can make this look nice and smooth like we want it to look. And now we have our curve. Okay, go back to idle turn 90 right here, and we're going to add a metadata curve. So click Curves, add metadata, and we want to find our turning metadata curve. Click on that, and now we have our turning metadata curve. Excellent. Go ahead and click Save and close out of that. And now we have curves that we can use. Now, what are these curves good for? Here I'm in idle turn 90 left trimmed, and I'm going to double click on the rotation curve that we created. These curves are good for getting values from our animation. When the animation is playing, we can use a function called getCurveValue. And what that does is it spits out a value based on where we are in this animation if we're playing it. So if this animation is playing and right at this point I call getCurveValue, then if we're 0.2 seconds in, which is where we are here, getCurveValue is going to return a value of -74.807. That's the value right here on this curve at that point in time. Next frame, say we're here at 0.3 seconds, getCurveValue will return this value, which is -56.565. So wherever we are in the animation, getCurveValue is going to return the value on this curve. And that allows us to make smooth movements. That's how we're going to rotate our character when we're turning. So we'll go ahead and do that in the next video when we implement the actual turning of the root bone. So stay tuned. We'll see you in the next video.